Yes, hey folks, this is Tim, aka Faceless Fat Loss. Tim, also known as Faceless Fat Loss. I wanted to continue along the videos that I was doing concerning heroin, cocaine, and food and their addictive qualities and how that related to dopamine to help create the addiction, and cover in this video opioids, which we all know as the opiates, the heroin, which is derived from morphine. Now, this here is an article from PubMed.gov, which is a service of the U.S. National Library of Medicine, and what they're referencing here is the release of opioid peptides, which are protein fragments, gluten, which have been isolated from the digest of wheat gluten. All I'm evidencing here for you, they're referred to as exorphins. All I'm evidencing here for you is the fact that these opioid-like substances are found in wheat gluten, as one example. Now, I'm going to cover celiac disease briefly here, and this occurs when there's a sensitivity to the gluten protein in wheat, barley, oats, rye, and spelt, and even other foods that may be exposed to these kinds of foods in their refining and mechanical preparation processes. The celiac disease causes a malabsorption of nutrients due to the damaged intestinal villi that the gluten problem causes. It also causes an immune response, which I'll get to shortly. A full-blown celiac patient will often experience weight loss, but as I've covered in other areas of my research bears out, it's often the case that a pre-disease, full-blown celiac patient type situation will instead give will still give symptoms, but much less harmful symptoms, but not necessarily much less unpleasant, being weight gain and fat gain. In other words, if you followed me there, it's the weight gain and the fat gain can be seen as a precondition to an all-out full-blown celiac condition. Now here's a good example of this. This is a lady who wrote about her parents visiting who have to be on a gluten-free diet anyway, so she decided to go on one herself. Within 3 days of starting her gluten-free diet, she says she feels like $1,000,000. Now, for the record, that is definitely not always the case. That's not what always happens. Many times when people have grain addictions, they experience the exact opposite. They have withdrawal symptoms, just like what? Just like a heroin withdrawal. And they experience mega huge cravings. And why? Obviously because these opioid substances are there, and there's bound to be some kind of withdrawal symptoms when you're used to eating these products for so many years. So let me go on here. She says her depression lifted, and within a month she was losing weight and her brain started working again. I've been gluten-free for 3 years now. Not only do I feel like $1,000,000, but I've lost over 100 pounds. It's a great example there. Now, this study on exorphins and the drug naloxone. This covers milk too, but I won't really go into that in detail in this video. Wheat proteins, peptides can act like the body's own narcotics, the endorphins, and were described by this group of people as exorphins in 1979. Other food proteins such as gluten results in the production of substances having opiate, narcotic-like activity. These substances have been termed exorphins. Hydrolyzed wheat gluten, for example, was found to prolong intestinal transit time, and this effect was reversed by administration of a narcotic blocking drug. A narcotic blocking drug, folks. You're beginning to see the connections here. They reported that drug, this naloxone, a morphine antagonist, blocked 70% of gluten-derived exorphin activity while blocking 100% of the milk-derived exorphin activity. Isn't that something? A narcotic blocking drug. It really says it all, doesn't it, folks? Okay. Regarding oats, I get a lot of questions about oats all the time from folks. So they're still heavily debated in many circles due to specific proteins being absent, but others say that the proteins that do exist can cause the intestinal leakage or the leaky gut syndrome that I've mentioned in another video, presenting us with sort of an individual by individual circumstance where you have to determine for yourself whether it's going to work for you and how it's going to affect you, whether it might contribute to any intestinal permeability or the villi damage that creates the malabsorption. In my opinion, for anyone who is excessively overweight, all of these grains should be avoided, period. Now, here's another thing with oats. They cause abnormal changes in white blood cells in vitro studies. And many celiacs do get symptoms from eating oats. So that sums it up, in my opinion. That's all you need to know. If you have an excessive weight or fat problem, avoid these grains altogether. There's not enough evidence that says they would be any good for you, so try to go without them. Now, here's where addictions once again come into play. These protein fragments in gluten biochemically resemble and act like the heroin and the cocaine. Have you ever heard of the expression comfort foods? I mean, it just takes on a whole new meaning now, doesn't it? And see my other video regarding dopamine. On top of this, a drug addict and a celiac patient suffer the same compromised action of natural killer cells, which may partially explain why celiac sufferers and heroin addicts both incur such high rates of cancer. They both experience the downregulation of their immune systems in very similar ways. The natural killer cells are the body's first line of defense against disease, especially malignancy. You can begin to see how and why I make comparisons between obesity and cancer. Now, have you ever tried to quit eating wheat products and gluten-containing products if you're new to all this, folks? You know full well what a challenge it can be based on what I've just pointed out to you regarding the opioid-acting exorphins. Can you begin to see how so many of our foods are addictive? And on top of that, we're compounding it when we take in these refined grains that act just like simple sugars as soon as they hit our intestinal tract and spike our blood sugar levels. It's like we're getting a double whammy. You can see why we have so many of the problems that we do. Thank you so much for being a paid subscriber. Love, happiness, health, and peace.